Welcome on another episode of Pascal's China Lens, and this week we're going to talk about the dual circulation strategy, something that we've been hearing a lot over the past 2-3 months. Going to be part of the next 5-year plan of China, and what does it mean for China and how does it impact the rest of the world? So what is this dual circulation strategy all about? We hear about it a lot, specifically in government context. They're talking about the 14th 5-year plan next year, from 2021 to 2025. We'll have this dual circulation strategy centerpiece. And what it all means is, simply said, that the internal market, so the Chinese market, needs to grow and become stable, and that needs to happen by getting support from integration of the external markets, the rest of the world. And so China has an internal and an external policy to make this happen. It has to become a win-win. Now, these are all nice words, and when you hear win-win from China, you often think, yeah, they win, and do we win or do we lose? And so what is this about? Well, if you hear about this, the first thing that comes to mind is very similar to the Made in China 2025 plan, which is about China becoming a leader in innovation by 2025 in 10 different sectors, from aerospace to electrical vehicles to microelectronics, robotics, and so on. And Trump was very much against this, and Obama as well before that, because they clearly saw that China had the ambition to become the leader of innovation. They were going to subsidize industries, and they did. They were going to steal IP according to Trump. They were going to force technology transfers instead of to get market share for American companies in China. So not very healthy. And the government has stopped using Made in China 2025 plans since about 6 months, 9 months, because they felt this really is hurting themselves more than anything else. So now they have a new word, and the word is dual circulation strategy. And is it any different? That's what we want to find out. Well, when we look at the internal, there's some things that are very similar, but there's two new things. The first thing is that they want to increase domestic consumption. They want to have the household income to double by 2035. Today it's about $10,000 US, a little bit more per person on a yearly basis. 15 years ago it was only 2,000 or less even, means it is times 5 in just 15 years time. They want to double that in the next 15 years. And that means that China could go into an advanced economy level and get out of that middle income gap that they're into right now. That's the whole goal. And so they want their consumers to save a little bit less, consume a little bit more. They want to have the urban and the rural areas, that gap to close a little bit more. They want to have more healthcare and social security and everything, and pensions, everything to improve that stability of the country, so people start consuming more, so that actually China can produce more for its own people and not for the rest of the world like they've been doing so far. The second thing is very similar to Made in China 2025. This is about innovation, it's about Industry 4.0, but it's really aimed at manufacturing. And so this is something that they will continue doing. They're getting a little bit more refined in how they do it, because they know the world is watching them very, very closely. Now, the third thing is about the supply chains. And this is about rebalancing and diversifying the whole supply chain, which the whole world is doing. With COVID-19, we've all learned that we don't want to be dependent on China for medical equipment, for masks. Well, China figured out they have the same problem when it comes to oil or certain resources or microelectronics. And so we want to diversify. And so China wants to change its supply chains with its partners outside China and inside China to have more opportunity to actually get what they need when they need it. And that's smart supply chains, smart logistics. And it's actually going to lead China to become more smart in manufacturing. And so China here wants to become the factory for China rather than the factory for the world. And I think that's the big change that will happen. That mindset could actually completely change the way they put their priorities. And instead of getting loans or giving loans to service industries, they're probably going to give more loans to high advanced industries and less to state-owned enterprises or companies that are not providing quality products. This is all about the internal. Now, if we look at the external, how are they going to deal with the world? Well, there's three things there too. First of all, they still want to attract capital, so foreign direct investments into China means they have to open up their markets. They will continue opening up their markets. Otherwise, they're not going to attract the investment. They're not going to attract intellectual property. They're not going to attract talent. So they need to open up further. Now, this could be a rhetoric, but I believe that the new narrative is about we're opening this market on one condition, is that if you come to China, you need to localize and you need to understand that this has to be beneficial to the local market. And so those companies that understand the local market will get a benefit under this dual circulation strategy. Now, the second thing is about exports. Before, China has always been growing its GDP primarily because of exports, but that in the past 15 years has actually gone down by half, from almost 62% dependent on exports for the GDP to now a little bit more than 30%. So it's a big decline, and that will continue that decline. The export will continue to grow, but it will be growing in different areas. And specifically in Asia, with the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership between all the Asian countries, we can expect that a lot of that export is going to go primarily to Asia over time. It's also going to go to countries where there's resources, whether it's talent or minerals or whatever it is. So it's again that win-win thing. And then they're also going to diversify more into having a little bit everywhere. So I think the export will be a lot more sophisticated and not so much just dumping it all. And so these low prices supported by subsidies like metals and so on, I think that will fade away slowly because that is not part of this dual strategy. Now, it could be a rhetoric, it could be a narrative, it could be different in reality because people still want to make money. But the third thing is about capital flows. And what you see is that the capital and the liquidity of money is still very much dependent on the US dollars today. And the US dollar, especially for oil and a lot of other materials, it all goes through that currency. And so China is now creating or bringing out its central bank digital currency in order to make these trades a lot more easy between countries that don't really need the US to do business with China because there's so much mutual exchange, import and export happening between those two countries, between China and another country. And so we're going to see a liberalization of the digital money, the digital financial sector. And that is why China now is regulating this sector currently very much, because they're worried about the future and they want to make sure that this is helping China also for internal. This will change trade completely. So I believe that the external will be pretty much about not making political strong statements or dangerous investments in the world. They will be much more careful what they do, and they will always think, does this help China directly or indirectly so that the internal can grow faster? Now we'll see what happens, but this dual circulation strategy is definitely something we need to look at, because that will be the new plan, the new strategy for the next 5 years, and everybody in the world who wants to do business with China will have to understand what it means in order to be successful in dealing with China. So in a couple of months, we'll know more about the details of this dual circulation strategy and what it all means. But we can already guess that it's very simple. And that means that we in the West, if we want to do business or continue to do business with China and be successful and stay successful, we will have to understand and take into account what China wants. And it's not just about selling to China, it's actually selling for China. And I think that will be the change that we will have to get used to if we want to be part of this dual circulation strategy that China will launch for the next 5 years. Hope you liked this video, and see you next week for another video on Pascal's China Lens.